Hello, my name is Ethan Leitner, and this is going to be my HST 255 Writing Intensive interview assignment video. Okay, so the person that I chose to do this interview on was my mom. She was a nurse. That was her occupation, and now she's a nurse educator. She started off as an RN, then went to a nurse, and then a nurse educator. So simply why I chose her. I chose her because she is the hardest working person I know, and she's somebody who is very passionate, and I know would give good answers to the questions that I would provide. She has also worked her way up to being a nurse educator, like I just stated, and has experienced a lot through working through a global pandemic to working in a very sketchy environment in Detroit. My mom is also part of a woman-dominated profession, like I also mentioned earlier, in nursing, which I thought would be interesting to cover. She started off, kind of bouncing in between different hospitals, and eventually, like I said, led her way to being a nurse educator at Hickman Hospital. So one of the first questions that I asked her was, how was the fact that you're a female affect you in your everyday job? And she said that it didn't really affect her in any big specific ways. She just stated that she has a traditional female job. But one thing that she did mention was that male nurses get promoted a whole lot faster despite having minimal experiences, and how they end up seeing them up in management positions after only working the floor for a couple years. My mom also speaked on how her gender kind of affected her job in a negative way. She said that she heard patients say bad things about women. One of her bosses, one of the patients actually ended up grabbing her boob because they thought that was okay. So yeah, she also touched on how, being pregnant and working as in a physically demanding job like nursing, being pregnant was very hard for her, and that she worked basically until she couldn't anymore, and how like she wanted to work for as long as she can because how'd she put it here? She said that the more time you take off when you're pregnant, the less time you have after you have the baby, because you are only good so long off. Yeah. So yeah, you don't have an unlimited amount of time when you have a kid. So my mom said she experienced something over time that we talked about in her interview that made her job harder to do more efficiently, and to do a better job. She experienced something which is common for all nurses called passion fatigue, and it just made her difficult to do her job, and that's eventually why she ended up switching to be a nurse educator. More recently, one thing that happened at my mom's hospital where she works as the nurse educator is that people threatened to go on strike. And I kind of talked to my mom a little bit about that and asked, do you think gender plays a role in this? She said she didn't think gender played a role in it, but she did kind of share her opinions on it. She thought that the people were being greedy, like what they were asking for, didn't kind of line up with what they eventually ended up putting in the contract to try to force them not to strike. So there was a lot going on there. She does say that has a lot to do with Michigan, though, with the strikes, because it's a very big union state. When I asked her about, do you think that women are taken less seriously in the field, she answered with no, but again, she, went back to the fact that the percentages of males in management are way higher than women in management, and which is kind of crazy to think about because it's a woman-dominated field. So you think those people would be promoted to getting to management positions, but she said a lot of men find their way there with minimal education, for that job, which is obviously shows that gender plays a role in this a little bit. She spoke on how at her hospital, the Hickman one that I just mentioned, that she has been there was a guy who had been a nurse there for maybe 10 years and didn't have his master's degree, only his bachelor's, and yet he is the head of nursing for her hospital and one other hospital too. She just thought it was unfair that he was able to get into that position. She think that gender played a role in that. One question that I asked her was, why do you feel like this is a field dominated by women? And she said because caring and empathetic qualities are more shown in women, which would better fit like a job like nursing. And we kind of had a good conversation because I related it back to what we learned about teaching in this week, how those sorts of qualities pushed women into being teachers in those 1800 times. So, yeah. Another interesting question that I brought up was, I was kind of curious, were working conditions always the same for nurses, or how have they changed over time? And my mom talked about that, as technology increased and you learn more about infection disease and stuff, yes, working conditions got a lot better. She said that nurses never used to wear gloves, and now they wear gloves with everything. They also, more used to use needles to do everything, but now they're trying to be as needleless as possible. She said the pay is equal and everything between men and women, which is good. And she said that gender, at least to the best of her knowledge, didn't really play too much of a role in the working conditions. I don't know. She didn't really know too much about the past, but at least current day, she said it didn't. So, all right. So, kind of like the big takeaway, that I noticed with this that she focused on is that men getting into higher positions of management in the field just simply because they're men, and that's why they don't have necessarily the proper requirements that some women will do, but their numbers are way higher than women's in management positions. And how that's unfair, because those management positions do come with better working conditions and better pay and those kinds of things. So I think gender definitely, plays a big role, especially in management positions. That was a big takeaway that I heard that she elaborated a lot on in her interview. All right. Thanks for taking time to listen to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing your guys' discussion responses on this. So, yeah, have a good one.